Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now then, so the weekend that was in the URC was a very good one for the Irish provinces. Leinster 47-27 away in Edinburgh. Connacht also winners away from home, 22-20 against the Dragons. To continue Welsh misery at the moment, Ulster 42, Cardiff 20, that one in Cardiff. And then Scarlets did come back a touch against Munster in the end. It was Munster 49, Scarlets 42. We are, of course, at the business end of the Six Nations. Rounds 4 and 5 are coming at us back to back. Ireland go to Murrayfield, as has been well flagged, and then England in Dublin. To tell us more about the mood in Scotland, Tom English of the BBC is with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Joe.
So, this is an interesting game and was flagged at the beginning of the championship as an interesting game for Ireland. Gregor Townsend said of the defeat in Paris that it was Scotland's best performance of the championship, and when you consider wins at Twickenham, then at home to Wales, with Ireland and Italy to go for Scotland, they are on the precipice of what could be an exceptional Six Nations, or it could flatter to deceive a touch.
It all depends on what happens on Sunday, doesn't it? They have a chance against Ireland. If they were to beat Ireland and then beat Italy, then that's 4 wins, and they've never managed 4 wins in the Six Nations before. So that would be extraordinary. A lot of work to do before then for them. I don't think, although you'll find a lot of Scottish rugby fans who are loving what they're seeing from the Scotland team, but I think you'd have to search long and hard to find someone who believes that they will win. Everyone thinks that they can win on Sunday, Scotland. You won't find too many people, I think, here who believes that they will win. But they're loving what they're seeing. The team is playing really, really exciting rugby. And I think everyone at 19-0 down after 19 minutes in Paris, I think everyone's saying, okay, this is when the fun stops. 2 wins out of 2, first time since 1996, 19-0 down now. This is Armageddon. And yet, 50 minutes later, it's 25-21. So that 50 minutes in Paris, Scotland won it 21-6. And we're completely on top. And actually, they scored 3 tries in the day. They had really, really good chances to score another 3. So if you're trying to draw positives from a defeat, there were plenty for Scotland in Paris.
We will come to Finn Russell in due course, so I'm taking his name off the table for a moment. What's been going so well for Scotland of late?
I think they have found carriers, not found them, but they're certainly the carriers up front have stepped up. I'm talking Schumann here, George Turner, Xander Fagerson has made a difference. Richie Gray, a guy, the forgotten man. A lot of people thought he was finished on the international stage. He's come back in and given the line out a real solidity. Matt Fagerson, carrier, Jamie Ritchie developing as a leader, as the captain of the team, good on the ground, good turnover specialist. That's one function of the team. The midfield has been a revelation. Jones and Tuipulotu, absolutely deadly. Working in tandem with Russell, of course, but the two of them have been. They've taken a bit of the creative. I know we're going to talk about Russell later on, but they've taken a bit of the creative burden off Russell, and they've actually asked questions of opposing defences. So it's not just about Russell anymore. It's about the 2 guys in the midfield, and it's about this wrecking ball out wide, Duhan van der Merwe. So the Scottish threats are all over the place now, and they look after ball pretty well. So a lot of things have come together to build an entertaining team. That still has a long way to go, but and there's the squad depth as well. The guys coming off the bench are much better than they have been in the last 20 years, I would say.
Yeah, I have seen the Tuipulotu Jones centre pairing described as as good as any in the professional era, Scotland?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think the 1999 team under Jim Telfer, midfield there was very good. But certainly in the history of the Six Nations, Scotland haven't had a midfield partnership like this. And Tuipulotu, like he's a bludgeon and he's a rapier. He's a very accomplished footballer, and his form has been sensational. Really, he's created a number of tries. He can do it all, And I don't think we've necessarily seen the best of him in terms of his line breaks and all that. He hasn't done a lot of that. A lot of it has been quite subtle, little touches. Little grubber threw in Twickenham for a try for Jones, assists here and there, linking the play brilliantly. I was speaking to Gregor Townsend I bumped into him last week, and he feels there's a kind of big performance in terms of line breaks coming for Tuipulotu to round off all the other stuff that he's doing. He doesn't know if it's going to be against Ireland, but this guy has made a huge difference. Bear in mind that leading into the Ireland game last year, Tuipulotu was dropped from the squad for Dublin because he was one of the 6 that went out drinking the weekend before. So he's come a long way, just like Scotland have come a long way, I believe.
Yes. And one other point about Scotland is that it was noticeable against this behemoth French pack that they stood up to them and potentially got on top of them for a fair portion of that game in Paris. It would often be said that an Irish pack could maybe outmuscle is too blunt a way of putting it, but outmuscle a Scottish pack. And that would stick in the mind because we don't say that about many Irish packs. Is there a bit more fight, bulk, meat in that Scottish pack this time around, Tom?
Yeah, I think there is. Certainly in the front row. I mean, that's a big, heavy front row, and it's a mobile front row, pretty dynamic. I think maybe in the last 10 minutes, in Paris, Scotland got out muscled. Certainly, the last 5 minutes, They got out muscled, and that was that's why the losing bonus point got away from them. Just before that, about 75-minute mark, they were still 4 points down. They had a line out around halfway, and they coughed up the line out. Now, had that ball gone to hand, I think they would definitely have got a losing bonus point, and they may even have won the game. Because the thing about this Scotland team, yes, they seem more physically robust, but they're dangerous anywhere. So from halfway on the front foot in Paris, you'd be thinking Russell might come up with something here. Tuipulotu, Jones, Van der Merwe, give him the ball and anything can happen.
Yeah.
So I think they certainly feel that was the one that got away. But they are, like Ireland, I think Ireland, the ultimate test, obviously the ultimate test for everyone now, of Scotland's creativity. Can they break down Scotland's defence the way they broke down France and Wales and England? And physically, can they live with Ireland the way they lived with France and bettered them for a large part? And certainly dominated Wales and held their own against England physically.
So that's the on-the-pitch picture. As ever with Scotland, the most interesting stuff is behind the scenes and off the pitch. And that's where I really want to lean into your sense of what's going on and your expertise. So you mentioned, for instance, Tuipulotu is one of those 6 players who goes out and then doesn't play in Dublin. And I would say at that stage, looking in from afar, the general refrain of Irish rugby pundits when it came to Scotland was, these are jokers. They don't have discipline. There's something culturally rotten. They win a game and it's champagne out, look at us, and then they're flaky. That would be the very ungenerous version of events. So I'm curious what's happened over the last year, and in particular, I'm looking at, for instance, Finn Russell dropped from the November squad. Now, it's worked out beautifully here for Townsend because he got to drop him and also keep him the way injuries fell. But Russell dropped and captaincy taken off Hogg. Two of the players who perhaps led the charge on that night out and were setting a certain example as senior players. So I'm guessing here, and you can fill in the blanks, has there been like these two leading senior players have been disempowered somehow? And the younger generation are now setting the standards and leading by example, and Russell and Hogg are more part of the scene as opposed to leading the way?
No, I wouldn't say they have been. They're lesser forces in the squad. I wouldn't say that at all. I think they've probably grown up a bit. Certainly Russell, he's become a father now. He's a dad now. And I would give Townsend an awful lot of credit here, because there's been numerous eruptions between the two of them since 2020. As you said, the most recent one was November, when Townsend, he picked 3 10s in his 37 or 39 man squad, and Russell wasn't one of them. He picked Ross Thompson of Glasgow, who played half an hour to that point. That's this season, and said that he had more form and consistency than Russell had, who's playing quite well at the time for Racing. Then subsequently played extremely well for Racing. So that was just not tenable, right?
Yeah.
And that blew up in Townsend's face. And I remember having a couple of post-match after the first couple of November internationals in Murrayfield, having a few testy exchanges with Townsend post-match about where's Russell when you're bringing him in. And Adam Hastings got injured in the second one of the November internationals, so he obviously needed a 10 for the third one, which was New Zealand. And Townsend said, Russell is among the ones we will consider. And we're going, hang on, what do you mean among the ones? So, looking at that, I was thinking, I'm not sure there's a way back here.
And what do you think was going on there? What Gregor Townsend in his private moments, if he was asked, what's the number one reason you've been this guy from the squad? What do you think that is?
So, Russell did not play well in the Six Nations in 2022. It did not play well at all. And I think the communication between the two of them hasn't been great. It's a million times better. It's a world away from what it was. I just think he didn't maybe trust him. Maybe he thought that Russell was trying to kind of dominate the environment in terms of game plan, in terms of my way or the highway, Gregor. Maybe Townsend felt a bit challenged by him within the team environment. There'll be elements of truth about all of that, because the one thing that's not true is it was the stated reason that he was effectively the fourth best out half in Scotland. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? So everyone was searching for reasons, and that's what kind of we alighted on, that, okay, the relationship, it's hit a bad place again. And this is the third, maybe the fourth kind of moment of turbulence between them. And I was thinking, I'm not sure he's coming back from this. Yeah. But they have, and it's to both of their credit. Finn, when he came out and after the first one in 2020, he did an interview in a newspaper and he eviscerated Townsend. He absolutely lambasted him. And at that point, we're thinking, wow, Townsend is going to have to, if he takes this on the chin, he's done well. And he did take it on the chin, soaked it up, changed his ways a little bit. Then there was another one. Then there was another one. And somehow they've managed to get to a place where when they talk about each other, they're like the Chuckle Brothers now. I mean, it's incredible, really. They found this place where Townsend can have his input, and he's had much more of an input on Scotland's attack this season than he did last season. But within that, and Townsend has been accused of being a bit of a control freak. I think he stepped back from that, and he's allowed Russell his place more. But Russell has also maybe not been as my way or the highway. So somehow, by accident or by design, they've found a happy medium.
So interesting. Touch of good fortune about it that the injuries happened when they happened, and Townsend effectively had to bring him back in. Because one, you get him back in, and he's obviously their best out half. But two, Russell knows that Townsend was serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Russell wants to play in another World Cup. The last World Cup was a nightmare for Scotland. He desperately wants to play for Scotland. And even when people were saying this relationship is not going to work out, there was always the hope that that carrot of a World Cup, Six Nations, winning more caps, was going to bring him back to the fold, and it has. And sure enough, when he comes back in against New Zealand, he was immense, absolutely immense.
Yeah.
And since then, the relationship has been excellent. Russell's form has been good. Reading some of the stuff from the English papers on the England-Scotland game, I thought, and actually some people within the Scotland squad thought that he was getting 9 out of 10 and 10 out of 10 in the old match ratings. Actually, Russell played really well for about 10 or 15 minutes overall in that game. Second half against Wales, unbelievable. And pretty much for most of it against France. It was Russell who led the comeback. He was outstanding. One of his best performances for Scotland was that France performance.
One of the reasons I use the word disempowered talking about Russell and Hogg, and I do take your more nuanced version of events, it's not simply that, but the reason I was thinking that has been the captaincy. So Hogg was the captain 2020 to 22.
Yeah.
He would often talk up the potential of this Scottish team in a big way. At times his performances were then lacking, and then he was part of that group that went out, and Jamie Ritchie, age 26, the new breed, is made captain. And again, Gregor Townsend, in the grand tradition of, well, we can't believe a word you're saying to us publicly, he said this was to relieve the burden on Stuart Hogg. Stuart Hogg did not see it that way. He saw this very much as downgrading of his status. He was not happy. So Hogg and the captaincy, what's your sense of what's happened there?
I think after the Ireland game in Dublin last year, when the drinking stuff had come out, there was a press conference afterwards at the Aviva, and Hogg was truculent, kind of evasive, hugely uncomfortable. And I think there was always a sense that after that he was going to lose the captaincy. He was not going to go to Argentina for the summer tour. And maybe that was the time to shake things up a little bit. I think it was a good decision to take it off him. He hadn't been playing great. I think he loved being the captain and campaigned to be the captain. And you could say maybe that was a bit of ego, maybe a lot of ego. But he was a senior player. There weren't too many contenders. And he got it. He wanted it and he got it. And I think it was time to take it off him. I'm not sure if it was. I'm sure it would have been painful for him, but also maybe an element of relief too.
Right.
Because I think the whole captaincy thing, while it agreed with him for a while, when things started to get tough, he kind of took it a bit personally, and he's very, very proud. And we can take the mickey out of him, and I know a lot of people in Ireland take the mickey out of him, but he's incredibly, incredibly proud player. And when he was frustrated, you could see it. I mean, you could see his emotions are written all over his face, So I think since they took the captaincy off him, I think he's played solidly for Scotland. I still think there's more in him, but I think it was a good decision for Townsend because you need to move on. Richie is younger. Richie is a kind of hard edge. Doesn't give a toss about his image. He's a nice guy, but you're never going to see him in society magazines, He's just that no-nonsense kind of old-school rugby player. He's as close as, I'm not saying he's in the same league, but I think he's got potential. But he's kind of like that Peter O'Mahony type, tough as old boots, uncompromising, stick his head into anything, will to win through the roof. And I think that's what Townsend wanted to get to. And I think it's actually been a relief for Hogg. He's going to win his 100th cap at the weekend. And I think it's probably a sore one for him to lose it, but probably a blessing in disguise.
Okay. And in fairness, not everyone can hold court in society magazines like yourself, Tom. So that's...
well, Joe, I think, you have a bit of that in you yourself. You know what I mean? Good-looking fella like yourself.
Oh, I'm fraying around the edges. And that's not to say I agree with your initial...
But listen, the whole Hogg thing, right? And the whole Scotland thing. And this came up again last week. It's like, what is it about some people in Ireland that constantly accuse Scotland of being uppity and arrogant when they're not?
Do you know
I'm living here for 18 years. I can promise you they're the most pessimistic group of rugby fans you will find anywhere.
That's interesting. It's more actually... So this blew up a touch in my world last week when Andy Dunn was on.
Yes, it was Andy's comments, yeah.
Andy reckoned that there's a simmering inclination on the Irish players' part to put the Scottish players back in their box a little bit. And he reckoned, basically quoting him here, Ireland will go and do a right number on Scotland at Murrayfield. And so that perceived arrogance was something you picked up on, I think, and you might have thrown the clip out to Twitter. And then I had a weekend of really angry responses from people who had Scottish flags in their avatar, which was really appreciated. So thank you for that.
Anytime, Joe.
I actually would think there's no sense that the Scottish rugby public are arrogant. Far from it. I think that humorous pessimism is would be the order of the day. I think there's been a sense that a lot of the Scottish players carry themselves as if they've done a lot in the game. They talk the talk. They win a game and they start really talking the talk. And there's nothing wrong with talking to talk, but then there is a fall and they let everything fall apart. Or the work rate isn't there. You talk about Hogg and Russell. So some of the work rate on show in last season's Six Nations was like borderline disgraceful. And so I think the Irish pundits look at Scotland and think too much talk and they've no right to talk given what they've achieved.
But where is the evidence of all this talk? Give us some examples of Scotland players talking the talk.
It's more... I can't give you dates. But you see, that's times.
The point, though.
I can't give you dates and times. But I can't give you dates and times. But definitely over the last couple of years, I'd have a real... If you go back and listen to a lot of the Six Nation preview shows that like the BBC will do, or those kind of things, there's a fair bit of like, we've got all the talent in the world. This Six Nations we're going to deliver. I think there's a vibe of that. There's never been a sense of we've got all the talent in the world. When Hogg was captain, he'd be routinely asked at the start of the Six Nations, "Do you think this could be a big year for Scotland?" Yeah.
Yes, I do. What is he supposed to say? No, we're hopeless. We're crap. We're making up the numbers.
Yeah, that's a fair point, right? And there's a degree of there's no doubt that Irish rugby pundits are just kicking the piñata here because there's a degree of fun about it. But I suppose if you're to be ultra picky, maybe you say, oh look, talk is cheap. All we're thinking about is the next game. Boring. Go to the Leinster Media School and come back to us. That kind of a thing. But look, it probably is a touch. The characterization of Scottish rugby as like super arrogant. That could be a touch unfair.
I think it's not. I think it's just completely bonkers.
Right.
And it's the only. This is the only place you hear this from is in Ireland towards Scotland. England don't do this. France and Wales don't carry on like this.
Do you know when it started? Do you know when it started? Right. I can almost pinpoint when it started. I bet my life on this because I remember at the time it caused a bit of a ripple. Ronan O'Gara, when he was freshly retired, he was on RTE's panel, and before kick-off in a game, he uttered lines to the effect that they're full of talk, and I think Ireland will put them back in their place. And get a reputation for getting up early in the morning, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, and I remember Rog coming out with that and absolutely scratching my head going, okay, what have I missed here? Where's all this arrogance? Do you think
the Irish players have seen it in the Scottish players behind the scenes somehow? Like, it was quite a pointed O'Gara moment.
I don't know what players would say to players. But I would doubt very much the Scotland team that have won nothing since 1999 are going up to an Ireland team that have won a lot for club and country going, show us your medals. None of the Scottish players have any medals to show them. So that scenario doesn't ring true to me at all. I think a lot of people in Scotland, most people in Scotland, are just at a loss to figure this out.
Yeah.
As a rugby country, the punters are, their feet are cemented to the ground.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was ever the fans. It was never the fans.
Yeah, but even the players, they've been through some hard times, So, but it's almost like they win 2 games in a row for the first time since 1996 in the championship, and it's like, a few people think like you're not allowed to kind of celebrate this, Scotland. You're not. Scotland players are allowed to dream a little bit as well, and I think there's been over here. There's a feeling that Ireland has got a bit arrogant, with all the success, and the last time Scotland beat Ireland obviously was 2017 in Murrayfield, and it wasn't Scotland played well. It was the bus was late. Joe Schmidt, famous, our bus was late. I was at that press conference and I was mortifying.
Sorry, how, in fairness, how are we meant to perform if the bus is late?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and Joe, with his meticulous planning, how could Joe Schmidt's bus ever be late?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Joe. So there's a lot of that. There's like everyone in Scotland would look to Ireland and as the template and be scratching their heads. How in the name of God have Ireland done all of this? The teams are Leinster and Munster, Ulster to a lesser extent, won the trophies, the international team, the conveyor belt of talent. They look at Ireland with a sense of awe. It's like, God, imagine being like that. Imagine winning European Cups and Six Nations Championships. There's admiration there, but they feel like coming back from certain parts of Ireland, parts of the media, is this kind of mean-spirited stuff, and these accusations of arrogance and uppity Scots. Where I'm telling you, it's in my experience of many, many years living here and being around the rugby scene, it just doesn't exist.
It's very hard to argue with you. It's very fair. I think there is a slightly derisory, arrogant attitude heading the way of Scotland from this rugby country here, yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen it, I've heard it. Now, Ireland obviously, deservedly, rightly, be incredibly proud of what we're doing as a country, but I don't know why people feel the need to put down Scotland. I mean, I don't get it,
Yeah,
I just don't get it.
Fairly or otherwise, I do think Hogg and Russell as the faces of the Scottish international team who flatter to deceive and attract a huge amount of attention and publicity and 9s out of 10s because he does something flash, but then the 4 intercept passes, the thing implodes. I think it's more about those two than almost anything else. I think they are just seen as the exemplars of everything that's flaky. High profile and have done nothing.
So is it the media's portrayal of these two people?
Yeah, perhaps, but equally,
rather than the people themselves.
Perhaps I don't have a great feel for them as people, so it could be a touch unfair. It's the media profile, and it's then what they've done on the pitch. Because Russell last year, I remember on Virgin, Shane Horgan's disgusted watching Russell not track back.
Yeah, against France, that was disgraceful, and that was part of it. That was part of as I said earlier on, he played very poorly in the Six Nations last year, and that added to the problems. That particular incident, and he highlighted it, and it was a horrible incident from Russell.
So I think that moment, married to Racine, hanging out in La Defense, look at my skills, there's a degree of actually they're prioritising what's not important. And it is more Hogg and Russell than most. I don't think anyone in Irish rugby is like, geez, Jamie Ritchie has some neck in him. I don't think it is that.
Yeah, if you say that, I'd run away very quickly if you were to say that to his face. Okay. Hogg has won a European Cup and he's won a Premiership with Exeter. Russell has won nothing. He's won a Celtic League or whatever it was called back in the day with Glasgow. So he's won nothing in his career. I get that. Like, I get why, say, Sexton, Russell was picked ahead of Sexton, actually was probably more bigger, was picked ahead of Sexton for the last Lions tour. But people are going, what, Russell, what's he ever won? Sexton should have gone on the Lions tour, right? I know there was injury stuff. Maybe that's it. Maybe they're holding that against Russell, that he was picked and Sexton wasn't for the Lions tour.
To be
Is
fair,
that part of it?
no, I don't think so, because like Russell was the only good thing about that Lions tour, and he was brilliant. So you could, like, in some ways, I think that Lions tour, for a lot of people, they looked at Russell and said, "Wow, like, I mean, this guy's the real deal and has matured." And like with Hogg, I mean, it probably doesn't help that it's against Ireland of all teams, he drops the ball when he's going over the line, and so that sticks in the memory a touch. By the way, because before this ends up ruining my life on social media, I am not defending this. I'm trying to work through this with you. I'm trying to just tease this out. I'm listening to you, and I think, to be fair, I think it probably is a little OTT, and it's become like a cliche in Irish sport, perhaps, like Scottish rugby. That's how we pigeonhole the last decade.
But yeah, like the last 20-something years, all the way from 2000 onwards, Scottish rugby has failed, right? Dismally. International stage, it's been a dismal failure. And everyone will say that. They've never been in the hunt for a Six Nations. Ever. Not once. Looking at that and go back to Hogg. Hogg is one of the record try scorers in Scotland. He scored a lot of tries for Scotland, largely in a failing team. Okay? Largely when the creative burden rested, if not exclusively, then largely on his shoulders. So he was huge responsibility on him. If Hogg didn't play well, this is before Russell came along, before some of the other cavalry came along in the back line. If Hogg didn't play well, Scotland didn't have a chance. So as a young guy, and I'm cutting him a lot of slack here, because he's played, I know he's had high profile cock-ups against Ireland. Of course he has, right? And people will criticise that, he's a bit of ego. I don't know. I think that's way overblown. But the guy has played exceptionally well for Scotland over many years. He's about to make his 100th appearance. And I think it's really, really unfair to look at his career and say, I remember when he dropped the ball over the line in the corner in Dublin. I remember when he made this mistake, when he made that mistake. He's been in the team for a decade.
No, agreed. And I'm
Do you know what I mean?
I'm almost agreeing with you, and I'm saying it's unfortunate for him that moment happening against Ireland. So something like that lingers in the mind, and then something like, a leader of the team, the captain of the team, and he's out on the sauce in the middle of the Six Nations. And so I think people look at that and say, well, that's not really what it's about. Irish players wouldn't do that, and so they would look at that particularly harshly.
Totally. Listen, absolutely, and I broke that story, much to the chagrin of the players involved, and some of them I don't think will ever forgive me for. But that was awful. It was awful. It was after the Italy game, which was the penultimate game of last season's Six Nations. Ali Price had made his 50th cap. They came back to Edinburgh from Rome, and 6 of them went out. And Hogg, the captain, was one of those. Unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable, ridiculous, stupid decision for him to do that as a senior player. And he just shouldn't have done it. There's no defence for that. There's no defence. And look, he'll have to live with that. But it's how you bounce back, I guess. And he's playing pretty well at the moment. I don't think he's firing on all cylinders, but I think he's playing pretty well.
I would say this as a final point. Quite a few of really good Irish pundits for a lot of the last number of years at the start of the Six Nations would say Scotland are the dark horses here, and they would see Scotland have a lot of good things, so it's not this total write-off, actually. And I would presume what tends to make its way over to Scotland is the more negative stuff. But I mean, Andy Dunn could have said 15 good things about how Scotland have improved, but still said, I think Ireland will do a number on them, for instance. So there's and from the beginning of this championship, round 4 in Murrayfield has been circled by everybody as the really tricky tie, much harder than England coming to Dublin. So it's, you're probably getting the more headline stuff, to be fair. I don't think it's a total write-off.
It wasn't. No, of course not. Yeah, but I don't think Andy's. I love listening to Andy. But it wasn't. I don't think it was him saying that Ireland. He thinks Ireland will do a number on Scotland. Ireland could well do a number on Scotland. They're the best team in the world. They could do a number on anybody right now. It was put them back in their box.
Yes. Yeah.
It was kind of pretty arrogant, dismissive, kind of almost personal way of saying it. It was kind of odd. And also, when you talk about...
Do you know how I interpreted that?
Yeah.
I interpreted that as Scotland are playing much better. They've won at Twickenham. They backed it up. I mean, how long had it been since Scotland won 2 games in a row in the Six Nations, So that...
Never.
Well, exactly. And that spoke of a certain, what's going on with this group at times. But so they backed it up. Really good performance in Paris. And I think what Andy was getting at was, before this lot get too much momentum ahead of a World Cup game, let's just put them back in their box and dent their confidence and try and really inflict a bit of psychological damage on them.
Well, that would be different. Yeah. I mean, that's a different context there. Well, when I say they've never won 2 games, they've never won their first 2 games in the Six Nations. They have won 2 games in a row. But Joe, that's different. That is completely different context on it, the one you outlined there.
Now, I do think you're right, though. I think there might have been a bit of, let's put them back in their box, the way you took it initially.
Yeah, and the Scots are going, Jesus, what have we done? What do we do to deserve this? And the expectation, you talked about the expectation, and before a lot of Six Nations going back years, people talking about Scotland as a potential dark horses. Very few people in Scotland, pundits, are talking about Scotland as dark horses going back many years. It's all of this noise is on the outside.
Right.
And it's like, and then they said that outside pundits in Ireland, England, wherever, Scotland could be dark horse. And then Scotland fall in a heap and they go, look at that, typical Scotland. You build them up and then they fall down. And everyone in Scotland is going, hang on a second, it was overblown what you were saying to begin with,
Interesting.
This team, and I'm not making any great claims for this team for Sunday, because Ireland are just exceptional. But Scotland are definitely improving. Last year was a horrible year for them. Previous 2 years showed progress. Last year was awful on many different fronts. But they've put the wheels back on the bike again. They've had 2 wins. And a really good performance in Paris. Frustrating. They could have won that game. They created an awful lot of chances that they didn't take, but they came out of it with a lot of positivity, and they'll be hopeful against Ireland. Don't want anyone to think
the arrogance. The arrogance. Get over it, Tom.
He's looking at me. He's one of them.
Let's clip it.
It's like he never spent a day in Limerick. Look at him. He's become one of them.
The headline of this will be English, Scotland by 10.
Turncoat English writes off Ireland.
Yeah.
I think Ireland will win the game. But I have very, very high expectations that it'll be a magnificent game of rugby.
Oh, listen, same here, same across the board here. Genuinely, I think Andy Dunn... You saw Jerry Thornley's reaction. He wasn't nodding along thinking I agree with you.
That was hilarious.
Yeah. So Jerry kind of thought, geez, steady, Andy. So Andy's a touch more out on his own there, So, but I take the point on Scottish perception of Irish punditry. That's very interesting. And I would listen, down the years, Andy Nicholl and now John Barclay, are the antithesis of arrogant. They're great.
Yeah, they're very honest, and they're rooted in reality, because the reality of Scottish rugby and this team over 20 plus years has been pretty grim, and there's a little bit of sunshine coming through the clouds now, but everyone is very, very realistic that Sunday could go wrong. And if Scotland win on Sunday, then everyone's going to go, whoa, okay, now this is different. This is new territory. We've never been here before.
Yeah.
But let's see what happens.
A very last question, and this has been a really interesting chat on the point of Irish-Scottish relations. Is the perception that the Irish rugby team is arrogant? Is it the Irish rugby media, or is it the Irish rugby pundits?
Certainly not the team. Not the public. Scots rugby public and the Irish rugby public get on like a house on fire.
Yeah.
I just think it's certain pundits periodically popping up. Matt Williams would be one of them. Good old friend of mine. But there'd be history there, obviously, baggage with the whole. He was obviously Scotland coach previously and wasn't great, to put it mildly. So anytime Matt talks about Scotland, then, mostly, to be honest, mostly people will ignore it. But the odd time he might say something that might catch fire.
He might, but I think, in fairness, I've been working alongside him for 5 years now. I mean, Scotland also need to prove him wrong. So he's entitled to make a lot of the points he makes. The evidence is there as well.
Totally. Scotland, I mean, I keep going back to it. Scotland have failed for 20 plus years. And when you fail for that amount of years, it for me anyway, it takes an awful lot of convincing before I start believing. And 2 wins and a good performance at Paris is nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
To start believing. It's not nowhere near. There's really good things, and this team I feel is the best Scotland team I've seen in 20 years. Yes. I feel that, but they have to go and prove it.
No, sure. So certain pundits from Ireland.
Just certain pundits, yeah. Just certain pundits.
Do you want to give us your top 5, or is that?
No.
Jeez, Joe, don't.
You get me into all sorts of trouble. And you could equally say that. You could say, look, just wise up Scotland. Ignore it. You could, of course, you could make that point. But I think when they feel like they're being talked down to by and miscategorized or misrepresented.
Yes, yeah.
Their tendency is to fight back. And say, this is nonsense. And why is it always Ireland? Why don't English pundits or Welsh pundits or French pundits, why don't they ever say this? Nobody ever says this about Scotland apart from selected people in Ireland. And you could say, look, get over it. And I think that's a fair argument as well.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. We are pretty much out of time. Enjoy the game Sunday. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Joe. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Tom English there of the BBC with us. Our rugby coverage on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. We'll be focusing more on Ireland on Wednesday Night Rugby.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.